Skinny, the preseason finale. It's over. It's done with 3 games. We're ready to move on to the regular season.
And the best part is there's not a 4th game any longer. So, yes. and it is weird. You got this extra week in between. It's going to be interesting to see how coaching staff handles this. They're having Monday off, Tuesday's cut down day, then practices, Wednesday through, I'm assuming, Saturday, and then kind of start the normal week next week. But this is a little bit different, just the way the calendar's laid out.
All right, we're just going to get right to it. The final score doesn't really matter against Miami, though it was a pretty entertaining end if you were at Paul Brown Stadium. Joe Burrow, 3 plays.
And that was the plan all along, apparently. Even if they got the first down, the whole first-team offense was coming off, Zach Taylor said. So that was all he was going to play anyway. He was going to play 3 plays, and all the rest of them were too. But as Zach kind of joked afterwards, it couldn't have been any more chaotic, the way it played itself out. The second down play that Jamar Chase dropped, and that is now 4 straight targets in a game that Jamar Chase has dropped. I didn't even think about this till I asked Joe the question in the postgame of how much he had to stay away from the fray because they played it live thinking it was a fumble. Clearly it was not. And if you could see the replay, you see he's pretty far away from it. But he said it was going through his mind a little bit. Can you imagine that had gotten him hurt? But yeah, that was the plan all along. They just wanted to check that box of him being on that field, getting a feel-good moment with the crowd. He got a standing ovation for the most part. I think it did exactly what you kind of hoped it would do.
You hope that Jamar Chase doesn't drop it. This is continuing. I know he had some good moments in practice the last couple weeks.
He did.
I mean, is this going to be an issue, you think,
I don't know.
when they kick off?
It's a legitimate question to ask. He obviously had the Sunday practice after the 3 drops in Washington where he dropped the first 2 passes his way that day. Then stacked some good practices together the rest of the week. In fact, a couple of spectacular practices during the course of the week. And they couldn't have made it any simpler for him today. Just threw him the bubble screen, which is exactly what I thought they were going to do. Show everybody the Burrow to Chase connection. Don't make Joe stand in the pocket. Get it out of his hands. Couldn't have been any simpler. And right through his hands into his face mask it went. Boy, I don't have the answer to that. The only person who does is Jamar Chase. But I will tell you this. This team needs to get off to a fast start. And if he starts doing this consistently in maybe the opener, I think you have to look at another route of snaps for an Auden Tate or someone along those lines until he can show you he can do it consistently. Hopefully this is just a blip on the radar, but right or wrong, that's 4 straight targets, 4 straight drops.
There was a lot that happened later in this game, not much with obviously the first and second teamers in there. What stood out to you in this final preseason game?
The 57-yard Evan McPherson field goal. And it stood out for this reason. Covering Bengals-Ravens game twice a year for a long time. When the Ravens get to around the 50, and this is legit, that one more first down puts them in Justin Tucker field goal range. And I think that wears on a defense sometimes of can't even give up one more first down. And I think McPherson's going to, at least he's trending in that direction that, hey, Bengals, if you're Zach Taylor, you're across the 50, and maybe you've got a 4th and 12 that you don't feel good about trying to get to the sticks to make, and you think, hey, let me get to Evan to 54 and we'll be fine. I think it's a real added weapon that they can play with here. And man, that thing was not halfway up the net, but it was into the net. That probably was good from 60, maybe 65. Is that his range? Yeah, potentially at the end of a half end of a game, maybe. I think it is. But to me, that's the biggest part, is that guy is a weapon. The other one is Chris Evans is a legitimate pass receiver. And you always hear about the third down. This guy is a legit pass receiver. I don't know how they're going to get him reps, how many reps they're going to get him. I don't think it'll be in that evolved Giovanni Bernard role. But, man, he really catches the football. And you get him outside isolated on a linebacker, boy, you got some real weaponry. They've done that a bunch of times in camp. They've lined him up in that same situation, and he's beaten linebackers consistently and made catches like he made. That cat's a weapon.
Do you think he's successfully played his way into being the 3rd running back on this roster?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think that. I think Samaje Perine's done enough to prove he's the number 2 guy. But I do think, again, if you get to a spot where Joe Mixon needs a blow and it is a 3rd down and you've run Samaje maybe a couple downs, and then Chris Evans has that spot. And again, it's not just to be a guy catching a swing pass or a check down. It's a guy who can run legitimate routes and go catch the football.
Let's talk about the kickers. You brought it up. Austin Seibert and McPherson. I mean, are they going to take 2? Because it seems like Seibert's the guy when they need the more accurate, the closer one.
And I think the only other way that it would have come into play is if you would have had the COVID situation that you had last year, where you kind of had to carry a kicker because of the way the rules were. You couldn't get a guy cleared, until a certain point of the week, and so you kind of needed to have that second guy. I know Darren Simmons has made a point that he thinks both these guys have proven to be NFL kickers, and that both will be kicking for somebody this year. For Austin Seibert, though, it's going to be kicking for somebody else. Now, I could see a scenario that if he gets cut and nobody picks him up, that he comes back on the practice squad. But I can imagine some other team is going to get mad at their kicker very quickly. It always happens in this league. In fact, Austin Seibert lost his job one game into last season up in Cleveland. That's how the Bengals ended up claiming him. So no, McPherson's done everything. I think this thing's been over for 2 weeks, and every time McPherson kicks, it just puts another nail in it. And that's no knock on Austin Seibert. He just doesn't have the leg. And you drafted McPherson in the 5th round for a reason, and he's proven it.
All right, between the 2 weeks or however many days we have until they kick off against Minnesota, what happens now? Who do you think is going to be here, and who do you think may not be here?
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence on Darius Hodge not being here when they signed Noah Spence, and after today, I'm leaning back towards Darius Hodge being here. I know they could stash him, but I think he's done enough to be here. I think the battle of do you keep Isaiah Prince as an 11th player, or do you cut Michael Jordan? And that's a possibility. That's a real possibility. You keep Michael Jordan and Prince, and then maybe go with only 3 running backs, and Jacques Patrick goes back to the practice squad. In the wide receiver spot, if they keep 6, Trent Irwin is definitively the 6th. If they keep 7, I guess it's Trent Taylor, Stanley Morgan, one of those 2 guys. I think they keep 6, and then the 3rd tight end. Thaddeus Moss has proven to be a pass catcher, but that 3rd tight end you're not keeping to be a pass catcher. You know what you're keeping him to be? A special teams player. And he's not really proven that to this point. It's not that he's unwilling. It's not that he's incapable. He hasn't proven it. So that'll be one interesting one for me to see. From a pass catching perspective, he had led the team today with 5 receptions. He shows it.
What's the thing? Do you think they make any more moves before they kick off, or is the team kind of here?
I think the team's kind of here. It would not shock me if they tried to find an offensive tackle in these 2 weeks to pick up. They're just so thin at that position. But other than that, I think that they've got the group that they're going to go with. Maybe corner. Depends on the Trey Waynes injury. That's one to monitor here the next 2 weeks. Will he be able to play in the opener? It's sounding less and less likely that he will. But you got 2 weeks to hopefully get that hamstring right. So, yeah, I think offensive tackle might be the only spot they go to the waiver wire for.